The second Elite Eight game on Saturday night will take place in Newark. This will be 1 seed Duke, 2 seed Alabama. And for anyone that watched Alabama BYU, and quite honestly, the Duke game too, there was no shortage of offense here. Duke and Bama both put up over 100 points. Bama 113 points, breaking a tournament record for threes made in a game, which dated back to actually 1990, which is shocking that even could take place in 1990 by Loyola Marymount. But Bama made 25 out of 51 threes here, hammered BYU by 25. Duke looked like they were really pulling away from Arizona. Arizona responded well. Ultimately, pulled it out at the end, with some free throws and got a couple stops at the end. But this game is quite interesting, right? Bama, obviously, their 3-point shooting, the way they've been shooting the ball, the way they shot it yesterday, you obviously can't not notice that, right? As a Duke team, who is a team that actually allows a decent number of threes, right? I mean, they're 153rd in 3-point rate allowed, which is something that I am monitoring a little bit here. I'm curious to see if Duke will falter from that a little bit and make some adjustments based on the high level shooting from Alabama recently. But this game has a ton of appeal. Obviously, ton of star power here. Sears, Flag, Proctor as good as he's been. Knipple, Holloway's been great. So this game really should be a fun game.
Yeah, it definitely will be. And it's a little bit of a pace battle as well. I mean, Duke likes to slow the game down. They're 270th in adjusted tempo, but they can also play at a fast pace. They're really good in transition as well. So, and for Alabama, they obviously want to get out and run as well. And Duke's a really good transition denial defense, but Alabama also has a really good half court offense. So I don't really see the pace being much of a factor on either side. Like if this game's played slow, I don't really think it gives an advantage to either team really. I think it would give a slight advantage to Duke. And if it's a little bit faster, maybe a slight advantage to Alabama, but both teams can play in both settings. So I'm not really all that worried about that. And yeah, obviously the 3-point barrage from Alabama is going to be in the back of Duke's mind in this game, but I still think they're pretty well set up defensively to guard them on the perimeter. I know they're 153rd in 3-point rate allowed throughout the course of the season, but that was some of that is when Malik Brown plays a little bit more. They hard hedge ball screens, and then that opens up some weak side shooting creation. But with more Maliwatch, they play more drop coverage and they try to stay connected a little bit more on the 3-point line. So ultimately, I think they also have enough perimeter defenders to, contest 3-point shots to be okay in that area. So I'm not too worried about the 3-point line. Obviously, there's worry against Alabama every time you're going to play against them from the perimeter, but I think ultimately Duke's going to be all right there.
Yeah, and to your point too, even though they were 153rd in rate allowed, they were 33rd in percentage. And like you said, and I think Duke's going to come out of here and with the drop coverage, stay attached to those guys. Not letting Sears and Holloway get comfortable early, right? They have the length, size, physicality of those defenders, especially like Proctor, James, Flag, of course, right? To bother those smaller guards a little bit and funnel those guys who, last night were able to just sit behind and shoot threes, right? Funnel those guys into their rim protection.
Yeah, and Duke's actually in the second percentile in catch and shoot opportunities allowed, which is elite, and they're in the 90th percentile in defending those. So I think a lot of the 3-point shots that they're giving up are to guys that they want shooting those shots. And I think in this game, it's going to be a guy they're going to be okay with Grant Nelson shooting threes, and he will oblige and he will take them. If he gets hot, obviously you're going to have to, kind of change what you're trying to do there. But I think Duke is adaptable enough on the defensive end to have success in this game. Another factor is Duke's rim defense and their depth of rim protection. Plus, they don't really foul at all. And Alabama really creates a lot of their value by getting to the rim, getting teams in foul trouble. I mean, they're 28th in free throw rate in the country, and Duke 17th. I mean, they're 17th in free throw rate defense. So I think they have the defensive facilities to slow down Alabama at least, and they're really good on the defensive glass as well. 44th in the country in defensive rebound rate. On the offensive end, it's interesting because Duke does get a little bit 3-point happy at times, and Alabama's looking to cut off all 3-point attempts, all catch and shoot opportunities. But I still think Duke. I mean, Duke's the number one adjusted offense in the country per Torvik. So I don't think they're not a 3-point reliant offense. I'm not going to come out here and say that, but it is something to monitor. They're 9th in 3-point percentage, 52nd in 3-point rate, and like I said, Bama's going to cut off those opportunities as much as they can. But Duke they have so many weapons. They can score in the mid-range. They can score off the bounce. It's not something that they love to do, but if they're forced into it, guys like Proctor, Knipple, and Flag, they're all super efficient in the mid-range, and they can score it at the rim as well. So I do think there are paths for Duke to score on this Alabama defense that, it's not the strongest, but I think it gets a little bit overplayed. Like, people are kind of assuming this Alabama defense is no good, but I mean, they're 26th in the adjusted defense per Torvik, and they do all the right things analytically, obviously, but I think Duke is too well-rounded of an offense to really slow down and play the analytics game against. So that's something to monitor, especially Alabama's pick and roll coverage in this game. I don't think they're going to be able to play their deep drop coverage the entire game. We did see them hard hedge a little bit against St. Mary's. They went back to their drop against BYU and had some success, but if Duke's able to operate in the mid-range super efficiently, they're going to have to switch something up. So that is something to monitor. And ultimately, I do think Duke wins this game. They're too well-rounded. I think they actually match up pretty well defensively. And like I said, I think the dribble creation of Duke's offense can give Bama problems.
Yeah. To your point about Duke's offense, right? They do like to shoot the three, right? They're 9th in percentage, 52nd in rate. But, like you said, they can score in a number of ways. And I think against this particular Alabama team, I think they're going to hunt probably some mismatches, especially, with those bigger guards, right? James and Knipple, especially, just big physical guards who can probably, like, they're going to end up with Sears on them. They're going to end up with Holloway on them at times. And, they should be able to kind of bully those guys and take them to the rim. And Alabama's going to have no choice but to help there. And that's where their value is going to be created in kicking out to open shooters at that point, right? They're not going to have as much of a choice, I don't think, unless they just want to give up layups at the rim. But also, I think that Duke is going to be able to create a ton of value on the offensive glass. They should get all over it. They're 49th in offensive rebound rate. Bama's 161st in defensive rebound rate. I think Duke's going to have a good game plan here. They're not going to get sped up by this Bama defense who is in the bottom 15 in the country in defensive turnover rate. Duke takes care of the ball at a high level. So I envision Duke doing a great job on that end, getting eventually what they want, whether it's later in the shot clock or whatever. But I think they're going to be just fine. Especially on creating those second chance opportunities. Where Bama, they do allow about 58% at the rim. So Duke should have their fair share of success there. I'm not going to ignore, Duke's a great defensive rebounding team, like you noted already. I'm not going to ignore Bama being also pretty good on the offensive glass. They're going to get their fair share of opportunities, right? They have the athletes. They're going to get theirs as well. So that's definitely an avenue, but I just think it's going to be a bit more limited for them in this matchup, obviously, with the defensive rebounding capabilities of Duke, right? You look at their starting lineup when they roll it out there, and everyone's 6'5" or taller, right? It's a tough matchup.
Yeah, I look at this matchup like the way Alabama matches up with Auburn and Florida. Auburn doesn't have to help in the lane on drives because they have such a good rim defense, so they kind of can limit the catch and shoot opportunities Alabama's going to get, and that's what they live off. They live off their drive and kick offense, and Duke matches. They're pretty similar to those Florida and Auburn defenses. And I mean, Alabama really struggled outside of Bama did beat Auburn at Auburn, but besides that, I believe they lost 3 of the 4 total, and they didn't really look good in those 3 losses. So ultimately, I think Duke matches up in a pretty similar way. And I think Duke's probably the best offense out of those three. You could argue that Auburn is probably the best offense, but the way Duke's playing right now, it's really hard to ignore that. I mean, they're certainly the best team in the country for my money right now, and there's just no real holes. And I think Duke can exploit a few holes in Alabama's defense.
Yeah. The one thing I also have thought about, right, is with these Alabama guards, they are a bit different than a lot of the guards that Duke has played up to this point, not just in the tournament, but for the season, right, through the ACC. Especially Sears, right? He's experienced. He's pretty crafty. He attacks relentlessly downhill, right? So if he can, create some advantages, these guys are different guards than they've played. So maybe Duke has to make some adjustments early on, and Sears has some success early, getting downhill in the mid range because he's also pretty good in that area as well. But ultimately, like if you watch Duke last night, the adjustments they made on like Jaden Bradley, who had some early success, they started doing a great job just walling up, making him shoot over them as the game wore on, and they ultimately like Duke's 43.2% and a 2-point field goal defense for a reason, right? They allow 53.2% at the rim for a reason, right? They make adjustments, they adapt, they do a great job with their length, size, physicality of walling up and forcing guys to take tough twos over them and over the size that they have.
Yeah, and I actually thought Duke's defense kind of performed pretty well yesterday, despite they gave up 93 points, but like 18 of 40 for Arizona inside the arc. I thought Arizona just made a lot of pretty lucky shots in the first half, and they ended up shooting 12 for 26 from three, but they made everything that they threw up there for the first 10 minutes of the game, and Duke was still tied or in the lead throughout that portion of the game. So I don't really think their defense performed all that poorly. So, and I think they match up pretty well here too, and they can force Alabama into the mid range with that drop coverage, and Bama with Nate Oates, you've seen they'll almost never take those shots. I mean, I saw Mark Sears take one against BYU to start the game, and I was like flabbergasted that he would even think about taking that shot. I mean, it went in, but still,
Yeah.
it's not a shot that Oates is all that happy about his players taking.
No, definitely doesn't love taking them, but as we have seen over the course of Sears' career, like he is very capable of making those kind of like 8-foot turnaround jump shots, right? So we'll see, but I definitely like the matchup for Duke here. Ultimately, I think they get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they do too, and I think could be a collision course for Duke and Florida to potentially play in the national championship. That would be a super fun game. I don't even know who I would take there, but probably Duke. But that'd be a super fun game. Hopefully, I mean, I'm kind of hoping we get 4 1 seeds at this point. I just think it would make for one of the most fun Final Fours that really we've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to take Duke here, the second 1 seed to advance to the Final Four, along with Florida for next weekend in San Antonio.